Greetings, my name is Jason Marcellus, and I want to talk about musicians performing songs in different keys. There was an interesting discussion that was online. It was in a comment section, but it was a valid point about how you have musicians that don't want to play songs in, say, different keys like F sharp or C sharp or B or keys of that nature. And so normally what I would do is I would talk about the post-2000 musician and lambast them for being lazy and they don't want to work on music and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not going to do that this time. What I am going to talk about, though, is about how challenging music was from previous generations. I was told a story about a group of young musicians in the 1980s that invited up this older musician to play with them. And they picked a song and they asked this older musician, "Hey man, what key do you want to do this in?" And the older guy said, "Makes no difference to me," as he proceeded to wipe the floor with those guys. Another story I heard was about an older woman who was a Mexican singer. And I was told that she knew Mexican folk songs and she knew thousands of songs. Any key. It's not like that rock band that has their set song of 12 songs that they play in a set. No, she knew thousands of tunes, any key. One thing I think that contributed to that is that a lot of the older songs from, say, the 1930s and 40s and 50s, they would have not only 2-5-1 chord progressions, but they would have key changes. A common occurrence would be if you had a song that was sung by a singer for the first verse, and then they would repeat that same melody, but they would modulate to a different key. And that was an instrumental section. This was something that happened with a lot of songs. 1930s, 1940s area, a lot of songs would modulate to different keys. And that was a common formula, if you will. I think that once you get to the 1950s and 60s, that's when you start to have less key changes, or if there was a key change, maybe it will go up a half step. That was common, but you started to have less of those key changes. And I think that nowadays, now the newer songs, they barely have keys, at all, and key changes, that's super rare. So I think that in the earlier part of the 20th century, the music that was popular at the time was more challenging because you would have key changes. And I think that generation, they didn't have problems with key changes. They didn't have problems doing songs in different keys, whether it was E or F sharp, B, whatever. It didn't matter to them. So I think that is something that played a role in the previous generation being more comfortable with keys than, say, musicians now, when they're asked to play in the key of B and they're just like, nah, I don't want to do that.